Hey, Guoba Wolf level 999 here. Another year, another anniversary character with you guys. Time has gone by fast. She is our main anniversary character and likely the main character of the Elation meta, and she definitely looks like one. So today we'll check out just how good Silver Wolf is through her kit, how good her eidolons are, and then talk about best builds and lycons and finish with teams. Like and subscribe if you want to catch my guides on EMC, the Nova players, and Evanesia, and let's begin. Silver Wolf level 999 is an imaginary Elation character who can't actually go to level 999, but that's okay. And because she is Elation and has no attack conversion, she does not care about having a tiny attack value. That base speed and base defense, however, are awesome, and it should be noted that in her A2 passive, she scales on speed. From 160 onwards up to a cap, not a goal, of 260, where you'll get scaling Elation percent. Anyways, when investing into her, I would level up her basics first, but her ultimate, talent, and elation skill are all important to max as well. Her skill at least can be ignored. Now, what does she do at level 999? Her kit is all about getting to her ultimate, so let's see how we get to it by first looking at her talent. After reaching 60 hidden MMR points, yes, get ready for 50 gamer references, she can activate her ult. However, she can also overflow by 240 points for a total of 300. Hidden MMR will also increase her crit rate by 0.4% for each point, and if her crit rate reaches 100%, it instead converts to 0.8% crit damage. Now, to get hidden MMR, our first source is in this talent, where every point of punchline gained gives us an equal amount of hidden MMR. This means any source of punchline in Silver Wolf's kit is a way to get to her ult, but also a way to boost those crit buffs, as well as gain access to other benefits that we'll see later. Punchline will more commonly come from allies though, for example Sparxie. She then, however, has two other meaningful ways to generate hidden MMR by herself, both tied into Elation skills. First, her regular Elation skill, yes, she has two, will generate 15 hidden MMR. There's no damage or anything, it's just ultimate generation. But thanks to her A4, both Elation skills can generate additional hidden MMR based on punchline points taken into account by said Elation skill. At 20 and 40 punchline, she generates an extra 20 and 40 MMR respectively. So, any AHA instant is going to generate 15 MMR if outside her ult, plus an additional 20 to 40 depending on if your team stacks punchline well enough. But it is specifically on Elation skills, not just AHA instants, which means both Yaoguang's ult and Elation MC's ult can activate this. And there is a final 20 hidden MMR in her kit, but it is granted when entering her ultimate state to help boost its power immediately, so this won't help for ult generation at E0. So we reach 60 hidden MMR pretty easily, and then what happens? Well, it's God mode time. She enters the God mode player state when ulting, consuming the 60 MMR and advancing her action by 100%, thus acting immediately in most cases. In this state, she is immune to CC, classic, she can no longer use her ultimate naturally, and she enhances her basic attack and elation skill, and then forces you to use said enhanced basic attack on her actions. She can use her EBA 3 times, like Rapper, before exiting the state, and when exiting, all of her points of hidden MMR are cleared. So all that happens, and then 3 new attacks come into play. The first thing that happens is that during the state, she deploys a zone, and if she has certified banger, which I mean she should, there's a chance to trigger a top loot box when an ally consumes 1 SP. Gacha in my gacha game. It'll deal a 90% elation damage attack split among all enemies and then trigger a random effect. Either Big Flipping Sword doing more damage, Kaboom Explosion recovering 2 SP, or Funky Munch Bean gaining 3 punchline. You have a 100% chance to trigger this the first time, but then this drops 20%, then 4%, then 0.8%, and so on, the new chance equaling 20% of the current chance. Don't expect more than 2 to 3 of these. Whilst we're here talking about Certified Banger, her normal Certified Banger passive that other Elation have is that she will deal 40% Elation damage multipliers in her basic and skill to enemies hit, as well as converting all of her attack multipliers in her enhanced basic into Elation multipliers instead. Basically, do not drop your Certified Banger. And so the second God Mode state benefit is her basic being upgraded. It'll now deal a 240% Elation damage multiplier attack. Remember, it's converted to Elation when you have Certified Banger. And this attack is split into 100 bounces. Basically, it'll go wherever you need it to go. There are also 3 loot box triggers that happen during the EBA, just like the ones from her zone from her ultimate state, meaning you get the 90% elation damage and bonus effects 3 possible times. Now, these aren't chance-based, you just get 3 triggers during a Silver Wolf EBA without RNG, but they can still be among the 3 options of the loot boxes. Now, the box isn't actually fully RNG either, and this goes for the ally-based boxes too. It is unlikely to give the SP loot box if you're high on SP for instance, and it focuses punchline if your MMR is low. So it's not true Gamba, but that's good. At the end of the EBA, you then finally get a 100% MV hit that is also evenly split to all enemies. Anyways, this whole EBA will then get an original damage multiplier, think Acheron's Nihility Trace, for 1.15 times or 1.3 times undiluted increase to her EBA's total damage. This is based on her current MMR amount and requires 120 MMR to max out. Now, a really cool thing with this EBA is that if you deal fatal damage to all enemies on the field during it, the ability ends and then kind of doesn't end actually, because it will repeat itself and reuse it based on the amount of bounces and boxes that remained. What this really means is that if you kill a wave, instead of overkilling like many puny non-Silver Wolf DPS, most of the remaining damage will be saved for the next wave. This also works on some enemy mechanics but does not work unfortunately on boss phase changes. Maybe in 5.2 we'll get that. Anyways, the final thing that happens during God mode is that her Elation skill gets enhanced. Screw just having one, especially since it's all about ult gen and we're in the ult at this point. Now it will deal 6 instances of damage, each doing a 90% elation multiplier. It also resets the fixed chance to trigger her loot boxes from her zone, which means you get that instant 100% fixed chance from an ally using SP. Then of course it drops to a super low chance again after triggering it a couple times, but yeah. But basically, you build up MMR with punchline and normal Silver Wolf elation skills, you enter God mode for 3 enhanced basic attacks, and during this ult mode, your allies can trigger loot boxes for big damage and additional effects. These boxes are also triggered during her EBA without RNG. You'll also get a new elation skill nuke. You'll still build up MMR of course during the ult, which will buff her crit value as well as EBA damage, and then after 3 EBAs you exit God mode and clear this MMR value. And so despite my Google document now already being 2.5 pages long, we are not finished, but we are almost done. We finally have her global passive. If an enemy target inflicts a CC effect on an ally, all allies will gain Firewall, which makes them immune to CC for 1 turn. This can trigger once a wave, and since it is global, Silver Wolf is not needed on the team to activate this. Again, I still don't like global passives, but this is a guide, so I'll be brief. I'm just happy that it seems limited to 1 ally unit a year as I had hoped, and it also isn't game changing if you play the game with a sustain, and some DPS have CC immunity already. There's also cleanses on non-sustains like Elation MC ult. It will be helpful to reduce sustainers runs RNG, it isn't useless, and I am worried about what will happen when you start stacking them up every year, but yeah. You'll see this being used to cheat a turn versus Kafka in the upcoming MOC, but other than that, it's just quality of life and I wouldn't pull for the passive like I wouldn't back in 3.2. But to end things on a fun note, her technique is a copyright-free spherical buddy that guzzles technique points in exchange for murdering normal enemies in a sort of automatic Acheron technique, and I love it so much. Anyways, it's Eidolon time. We'll first get a 20% vulnerability on enemies during her ultimate zone, useful for her, useful for the team. Then we get a buff to generating her second and later ults where we now get 20% of our MMR retained after exiting God mode rather than clearing all of it. This means if we could somehow hit 300 punchline, which we can't right now, we can instantly ult. And even if we could, we might not want to due to certified banger uptime if you only have E1. It just helps get back into her ult a bit faster basically, or lets her next ults be immediately stronger. Now E2 does buff the potential instant re-entering of her ult, as Wolfie will extend buffs now when entering God mode. It also gives her free extra turns and extra EBA uses when reaching 120 MMR milestones. 120 is not hard, but 240 can be. However, it can be achieved versus shield enemies, changing up your rotation, or with high verticals on your team. Just 1 extra EBA and ult right now isn't insane, just decent, and because it's subject to the team to get value, I would just hold off on this. Maybe this gets better and more consistent in the future. Another thing to mention is that since she is ideally in a dual DPS team, the overall team damage gain isn't extraordinary even if she does hit the 240 goal, compared to crazy hypercarry E2s like Finance or Evernights if she's a main DPS. E4 is then actually kinda neat, as it makes her enhanced Elation skill, Honkai damage demo, yes, it's called that, take 5 times the amount of punchline it normally would. Punchline has diminishing returns, but it's still a large increase to a decent damage multiplier, and it helps damage distribution a bit. Finally, E6 Mary makes her EBA's damage by 50%, aka an undiluted 1.5 times boost unless you got E6 Yaoguang or something. Then she inflicts absolute weakness onto all enemies when they enter combat, which makes them weak to all elements and have a neutral res of 0, or minus 20% if they're already weak to the element. This is the strongest brute force Eidolon in the game by far, as if an enemy has 60% res like some APOC shadow bosses, well, Silver Wolf E6 is therefore a 60% res down debuff, which is 2.5 times your damage. And so when combined with the 50% EBA Merrymake, this can be potentially the strongest E6 on a DPS that we have. Versus a neutral enemy, here are my Eidolon simulations for Silver Wolf 999, and this is with her Light Cone. This is considering a full premium team right now, so including team damage, which means Silver Wolf's actual personal gains will be much higher. And as said earlier, that E6 is very dependent on if you're brute forcing or not. E1 and E2 are also pretty variable, as it will completely depend on punchline and MMR assumptions, and for E2 at least I added a little note showing the gain I got considering 2 extra EBAs per ultimate. So that's the kit done, and hey, at least it wasn't Cyrene levels of long, and we can now move on to Silver Wolf's best builds. For Relics, we shall generally aim for the Magical Girl set. 20% Def Ignore is just really strong. It is still the only purely DPS Elation set we have right now, and don't be surprised if more options drop in future patches. Now, there is, however, technically the possibility of running Diviner, as speed scales her Elation percent, it's also just a good stat to get, and the 18% crit rate is nothing to scoff at. It's over double the crit value of Magical Girl. With 2.9 average subs of speed in this relic, as well as 6.2 average crit rate subs versus only 2.7 crit damage subs on Magical Girl, you have 6.3 more substats from this relic set on Wolfie, which can be about a 10% damage gain. Remember, even if the speed subs aren't reallocated into crit, speed will give her Elation percent. Anyways, the difference maker would thus be that 20% Elation Def Ignore, which is only a 12% damage gain at 0% previous Def Ignore, so a little stronger than those extra substats. But that means it's close without the final 10% Elation passive, so if you don't have a user in the team, like you're running 2-piece speed combo Yaoguang, well, it's Silver Wolf's best set. Even if you have a user in the team, it could be really nice if you need it to get to 200 speed. Just remember that Magical Girl does get stronger when you get Def Ignore verticals like Silver Wolf S1 and E1 Yaoguang. For planers though, we put the square in the square hole and slap a Punk Lord Stage 0 set on her. No close alternatives exist right now. Now, hopefully you haven't been ignoring high crit value defensive pieces, because we know from 4.0 that Elation does not care for damage percent, and her main stats will in fact be crit rate, speed, HP or defense orb, HP or defense rope. Damage dealer, by the way. She has no attack conversion like Sparxie, so we can opt for these defensive main stats and will lose out on nothing. Your priority subsets will be crit rate, crit damage, and speed though. And so speaking of stats, the first goal is speed. 160 is the minimum goal and very easy, and you can go faster all the way up to 200 with S1, which is a strong goal for any game mode. With S1 and speed boots, you hit about 164 pre-subsets, which means you need an average 16 speed subsets to hit 200. This is tricky, but I wouldn't be surprised if future Elation characters buff speed. Some upgrades that can help are E1 Huohuo, E2 Yaoguang, but also that Diviner set if you're really desperate. The next goal for her will be a high amount of crit rate. Remember, she converts hidden MMR to crit rate, but she does the same for crit damage at an equal ratio, and we also don't want to miss crits while stacking up. She will start with a minimum of 20, 40 if S1 MMR after ulting. So you could aim for 92 to 84% crit rate post allied buffs like Yaoguang S1, and either way, your MMR will convert to crit damage when hitting the cap. Crit damage will be buffed by your supports and her MMR conversion just fine, so don't be surprised if you only have like 80 to 100% crit damage pre-combat. Remember also that Punk Lord's 32% is in combat, not out of it. Anyways, now it's Light Cone time. Welcome to the Cosmic City provides us with 18% speed, 20% Elation damage Def Ignore, and 20 punchline on casting ult. The speed opens up the 200 speed breakpoint for high substat count builds. 20 punchline helps with immediate crit value in the ult as well as getting to that original damage multiplier, but it also helps her Eidolons 1 and 2 to either refund more at the end of her ult or get those extra turn MMR breakpoints easier. It's a little more damage to the team too. It's a powerful pull, stronger than the E1 if only choosing one, but parts of it can be compensated for. For example, most enemies are spewing out punchline right now, and the speed is only major if hitting 200. It also isn't a team-wide buffing cone, which means if you are running her with Sparxie, you'll see less of an overall damage gain. For other cones, she can use the Battle Pass cone, but S5 still isn't possible yet, and we have the much cheaper option Mushy Shroomy, which actually is a bit better than the Battle Pass at S1, and close to S5 anyway if running her premium composition with Sparxie, as it'll boost the whole team's damage rather than the Battle Pass just boosting her own a bunch. The S1, as we can see, is not too crazy in a longer fight, but it is the only way you're realistically hitting the possible 200 speed Silver Wolf breakpoint. If this cone lets you reach it and you compare specifically the 0 cycle damage dealt, then you're going to see a much wider gap between SIG and non-SIG cones. For more on her pull value, I'm trying something new and will thus have separate videos. This guide will instead remain all about her info rather than other units and discussion, so let's end with teams. Now, the unit that needs punchline for ult generation and MMR will definitely want the punchline generator the most, right? Well, the Yaoguang PTSD was actually not necessary, as she is the most necessary unit for Silver Wolf level 999 as of her release. Yaoguang's buffs, first off, are great, perfect for Elation, can get even better with her E1 or S1, and she buffs the whole team, which can include a potential Sparxie Sub DPS. Her damage on a top tier build is also not bad either. But the regular Elation skill and A4 trace of Silver Wolf make it so Yaoguang's ult is actually providing more punchline in a burst than Sparxie is anyway. As an AHA instant pre-ult is 35 hidden MMR for Silver Wolf without considering extra parts like Yao's ult generating 5 alone. This, combined with other punchline sources like Silver Wolf's own turn, can make her entry into ult super fast. She's also the only one that can realistically force a first turn Silver Wolf ult, with Yaoguang E1 being a guaranteed re-entry into Silver Wolf ult that no one else can do right now, and this drastically helps with downtime. If you instead use Yaoguang ult during Silver's God Mode state, well, the extra AHAs could allow for more loot boxes that no one else can do. We can't really maximize that right now, but maybe in the future. And finally, certified banger uptime is so important and a big factor here. Silver Wolf is so fast that she can lose uptime on it in a vacuum, and her being the sole character that can interact with AHA helps a lot, though EMC's ult can provide certified banger in a similar fashion. Now, Sparxie is the best third slot in this team. Her punchline generation is very strong, so you get crit value, elation damage increase, you get the original damage multipliers on the EBA ASAP, and you also help with E1 and E2 Silver Wolf. Her buffing is okay too, getting decent with vertical investment, but the real source is that she does so much damage in the team, not far behind Silver Wolf herself if Yao is around. It's a decision between better damage on Silver Wolf specifically versus 2 strong damage dealers with a Yaoguang. Now, if you don't have Yaoguang, you lose out on an aura buffer, which then means everything goes to Silver Wolf, and in that case, Sparxie's damage contribution falls off but still remains respectable. At least if you don't pull Sparxie, you don't need her, but she is a premium teammate in this team, and I wouldn't be surprised if they force a stronger synergy with later units, because right now they have a two-way synergy, but there are some synergistic sounding elements that are underdeveloped. If you pulled Sparxie and Yaoguang for your Sparxie, well, now you can run both of them with your brand new main DPS and no one gets left behind. How cute. As for Elation MC, I'll have more about them in their guide very soon, but they are another interesting MC. They're not universally OP like Remembrance, or archetype defining like Harmony, which makes me really sad, but they are still decent, they offer brand new utility, and they're completely free. Their main synergy with Silver Wolf is that their ult can duplicate an Elation skill, which can be used to either generate her ult up faster, or if she's already in her god state, instead can be used to unleash an extra nuke. Alongside Yaoguang, you could use Yao's ult to enter the state and then the MC's ult to send a nuke, as a double Elation skill power duo. Their buffing is okay, but definitely not Yaoguang tier and mostly single target. They also don't really do much damage even with a few selfish buffs in their kit, though it can help out in stuff like PF. Either way, they can be a fine replacement to Sparxie if you skipped her brain rot animations, especially if into fire res where her damage takes a hit. Other than these gamers, we'd then run a sustain or a support if you're feeling confident. Guoba is a top tier sustain for the Elation team thanks to her energy battering the whole team up minus Silver Wolf. Yaoguang's ults are potent, Sparxie or EMC ones likewise. She does however have a problem actually sustaining in hard content even post Nova Flare, so it feels like she's more of a unit that's between a support and a sustain. If you have Hyacinth E2, I definitely recommend using her here, but if you pull that monster, you likely pulled her for your Remembrance team. Even at E0 she's great though, as she can equip the M4's planer for 8% team-wide speed, which can be really useful for both Silver Wolf and Yaoguang. She can act fast and basic spam if needed for your Sparxie, or she can use SP herself at a high speed to proc loot boxes herself. But any competent sustain will slot in fine, the best characters to actually keep your team alive being Dan, PT, and Hyacinth. If running sustainless, then you could just run Yao, Sparxie, and EMC, but if you don't have RMC free to swap form and be run here, well, there are other options. Sparkle can be used as her buffs outside of the attack percent all benefit Silver Wolf, and they're pretty potent, stronger than EMCs of course. And to be honest, that attack percent can help Sparxie get more damage anyway. As for the advance, despite Silver Wolf being super fast, 50% advance is still 50% advance and won't be wasted sometimes, unlike 100%. You then have the S1 for more crit value, or you can dance it up like always. Droby E1 is good here, Cypher, Welt E4, any generic buffers. But since I found this last one fun, I included her, even if she may be hard to use and not be the best for you. Asta had a little resurgence with lower cost Cyrene runs due to her speed heavily boosting Cyrene's speed scaling trace and allowing for extra actions. She was also used with Firefly in 2.x, and now it's Elation's time. Aha's speed is dynamic and based on all Elation unit speed throughout the whole fight. And so Asta is buffing their action count on top of everyone else's, since she buffs the whole team's speed, not just one unit. Asta is still the only unit with team-wide flat speed buffing in the game. But more importantly, at 53 speed, you're also looking at 106% Elation for Wolfie, which is the biggest Elation percent steroid in the game, though that's all she's buffing sadly. And she does need a cracked Eagle build to keep up and ideally dance, but hey, Asta in the Big 26 needs to be mentioned. So for some example teams, we have the full premium sustain team of Wolf, Yao, Sparxie, Huohuo. If you don't want to die in anomaly operation, some other sustains may be preferred. A cheaper team can then be Wolf, Yao, EMC, Huohuo, which also works really well. And an even cheaper team would be Wolf, Sparkle, EMC, Huohuo. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this guide on Guoba Wolf level 999, and if you did, be sure to like and sub to catch the rest of the guides coming this week. I self-produce 100% of my videos, so I'm getting no sleep, but I hope they help you out to make it all worth it. Thanks for watching, thanks to my amazing YouTube members, and have a Guoba day.